Hi, Jennifer. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's really a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
I just wanted to hear a little bit more about your start on the flute and the beginning of your career. You've played flute from a really young age, but you never really had a lot of support from your family. You didn't really have a lot of representation of Black musicians in classical music to make you see it as a viable career. Yet you made it your career. You found the courage to kind of forge your own path. You started as pre-med and math in school and then went into music. So can you talk about a little bit, your start at that exact moment, that exact day when you said, you know what, I'm going to go for this.
Sure. Yeah, so I wasn't the type of person who, at the age of 10, I want to be a concert flutist when I grow up. That really wasn't me. I started playing when I was 8 and just enjoyed it, and I always thought of it as something to do like as a hobby, and my parents were, they were supportive, but they weren't necessarily thinking that music would be a viable option for me. They just didn't think that music would be something that I or anyone necessarily should make a career out of. So it wasn't like they didn't support me, they just sort of didn't see it as a possibility. So I didn't really have that kind of family structure. Basically, growing up, it was sort of about, I want you to have a successful job, and like a successful job means like making a certain amount of money and all those kinds of things. And I had lots of pressure to try to get into the best school, but that's pretty normal, I think, for a lot of kids, I
Yeah.
suppose. So when I played it, I played flute in school, I played it in band, I played it in orchestra, and I enjoyed it, but I wasn't really seeing myself as a musician professionally at all. So when I went to school, I was literally just using music as like an extracurricular activity to kind of keep me sane. And so there was like a transition point. So I was a math major. I really loved math. But then when I got to college, I was like, wait, this math is a little bit harder than what I remember in high school. And so I was like, well, maybe I don't need to be a math major. But I was always going to be a pre med major. But as I was just going through those classes, it's a lot. It takes so much discipline to become a doctor, as it does to become a musician. But when I was studying, in my second year, when I was studying, I got so frustrated because I could not see myself. This was like a career that I think my mom really wanted me to have, but I was not necessarily thinking that this is something I wanted to do. And so it was at that moment studying for a final in organic chemistry where I just put my book down and I just said, I can't do this anymore. Like, I need to study something that I really want to study as opposed to something that is good for me.
Yeah.
So like it was like I remember it was like a specific moment. It was studying for my final in organic chemistry in my sophomore year. So that was like the moment where I just had to just shift gears, and I said to myself, the one thing I really love to do is play music, and why not try? And as long as I have a plan B, why not go for it? So that was sort of the moment where I said, okay, all right, it's much easier to try to do music now and then go back and do something academic later than vice versa. So that was the point where I just sort of shifted my practicing. I just kind of started practicing a lot more seriously. Up until then, it was just for fun. I would just play, pieces out of the French book with my teacher, but I wasn't necessarily so disciplined. I didn't practice my scales all that much. I didn't do lots of fundamentals. I just played pieces because it was fun.
Right.
So, you know, at that point I had to be like, okay, now I have to really practice my scales and do all of these fundamentals and do all these things I should have been doing and I wasn't doing. And so I had to shift all of that. But so that was like a big transition for me, but I was like really motivated. So it worked out. So I was
Yeah.
able to kind of you know, get myself to where I needed to be, at least while I finished school. So anyway, that's sort of how things shifted for me.
And then after college, you took a break before grad school to kind of play catch up, I guess, in your eyes. But I love that idea because I think maybe more people could do that, take that time to really get to know your playing, time away from a teacher for a little bit, because it's a very big shift to go from being in school and studying for years to finding your own voice. So how was that year for you in between college and grad school? Did you discover anything about yourself and your playing that was kind of important to you?
Well, I mean, it was, I think, and this is, I think, very common. I think a lot of students, maybe go back home after undergrad and kind of take stock, or, take a year or two off. I think I'm seeing more and more people do that, and I definitely advocate for it if that's what you want to do. And going to school back to back to back is a lot. It's a lot of work for anyone. And so, yeah, my reasons for taking a year off definitely was because I was still playing catch up. I was still like practicing my scales like I was supposed to be doing all the time, and just getting things where I needed it to be. But as I moved back home, I had to have a job, and so I had a full-time job. And what I realized was, going into this year, juggling a full-time job, which is actually like a service job, on top of trying to practice, is really, really difficult. And so what I discovered for myself was that I used to rely on my teacher for accountability. My teacher would give us assignments. We'd have to have our etudes ready. We have to learn a certain piece in time for the recital, and all of these things, all of these goals my teacher had for me. But without a teacher, I had to just do it on my own. And so, of course, it was a lot easier just to, go through the course of my day at my job, and then I get home and I'm really exhausted and tired. And then to have to try to find the time and the motivation to practice after that, it was always much easier just to not do that at all. And realizing that I could just not practice and no one would like no one would say anything, and like I'm never going to get better. I'm never going to get to the place I need to be to get into any kind of school. So I realized, okay, it really does need to come from me. And so it made me realize that it is something I really wanted. And so I was able to find a way to, practice in the morning before I left for work, or actually like take a nap after I got home and then practice late into the evening. And so I was able to make it work because, I realized that, no one was going to push me like I was going to push me. And so not being in school, it kind of gives you that realization that, okay, if you really want this, you're the one that has to like make it happen, not your teacher, not the institution. You're the one that needs to make it happen. So
No,
that's what I really kind of learned from myself. Yeah.
yeah. And then what was your time at Yale like with Ransom Wilson? I read that you applied to a lot of schools, you got rejected from a lot of schools, and you just got into Yale and you kind of took a leap and went to study with him. I mean, is there any little part of you that has any sort of resentment towards those other institutions anymore? Like, you really missed out on me.
No, I mean, there are so many amazing flutists
Yeah.
out there. And so, I'm going through the process right now of, we just had our audition season is right now. And so there's so many great flutists, and, there's so many good students, and, I, you know, it was the right fit. It ended up being the exact right place for me at the time.
Yeah.
And I owe Ransom like a huge debt of gratitude for accepting me. I know he took a leap of faith for accepting me, and I'm just forever grateful. And we're still in touch, and I really appreciate his mentorship. And, you know, I think some of the things that he might have seen in me, like, my I was not a finished product like I think his other students were, but I think he might have just seen some potential. And so it, the fact that he accepted me, it, that whole experience, it also informs me now that I'm in the position that I am to
Sure.
kind of look for the same, look for the people with potential. Sometimes having a finished product is not always the only answer when you're looking for students. So that's been really interesting for me to kind of draw back on my experience now that I am a teacher.
Yeah. Do you find yourself um, hesitant to take those risks on new applicants?
It depends. I mean, at certain points, sometimes if you can just, it's really good to talk to the students, to talk to the applicants, and kind of get a sense of, do they have that like inner drive? Like, sometimes people are aware that they sort of were behind and need to catch up and all of those things. And you can tell, I think, by talking with them, if this is something that they can, that they can like work on their own and work on with you. I mean, you can definitely, I feel like I can tell a little bit that there are people who definitely have that potential. Like when you have that certain sort of musical intent in your playing, but some of the details haven't been all figured out, like that's like so much easier to work with than someone who's got all the details worked out, but not really having much of a vocabulary musically. So,
Sure.
yeah.
I wanted to, I guess, talk about potential a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of circle back to when you were starting off and you didn't see many Black musicians performing classical music, and the lack of exposure made you doubt your own potential. How has that shaped your mission as a performer and as an educator?
I mean, going to, I grew up in a very, I'm biracial. And so, I grew up in a mixed race household in a city that's very, very diverse. Like I've just always had a lot of diversity in my life growing up. But then going to the schools I did not see that very much. So I went to Stanford for my undergrad and then Yale. So it was like, I did not see much diversity at all. And so it was really, um, as I left Yale, it became sort of more and more important to me to at least like try to like I don't want to be the only one anymore, And so for a long, long time, I felt like I was the only one. And I really am appreciative now that I'm seeing more and more people, playing, doing lots of really exciting projects and getting more attention. And that's just so, so important. And, I've tried to, I was a part of the NFA. At the time, it was called the Cultural Outreach Committee. That's now the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And so I was a part of that committee, and we would program concerts by, Black and Latinx composers and, all of that. That was like for years we did those concerts, and we would always present pieces not a lot of people knew about. And I think now finally people are more aware of these composers and programming them on their own. I mean, it did take a slew of racial violence and during a pandemic for some of that to happen, but the work had been happening by a lot of people before then. So I think it's really important for us to continue promoting this music and giving opportunities to people as much as possible.
Yeah. You've also, I watched, I think, a video of you talking about an experience that you had when you've graduated from Yale, you were living in the city, trying to make it at the beginning of your career, and you worked at Starbucks, like a lot of other people do, to pay bills.
Right.
And that people that you looked up to that were kind of classical heroes to you, of course, don't know who you are and they are rude. So how is that? Have you always kind of kept that story with you, and then now that
Oh
you've,
yeah.
quote unquote, made it, do you understand the importance of kindness to everyone all the time?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'll never forget that experience working, you know, and, just to like set the scene, it's like my my jobs. I worked at Starbucks. I lived in Manhattan, so I worked at Starbucks, and we're in a very sort of well-to-do neighborhood selling coffee to people, and everyone who's working at Starbucks, almost everyone that I worked with was a person of color that were working at Starbucks, and we were serving coffee to, upper middle class white people. And so this was the dynamic. And so, you know, and it's as I come as I'm coming into this job, I am who I am. I'm coming from this sort of I have like 6 years of, Ivy League, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I come right, Ivy League stuff. I come to Starbucks, like I am who I am, and I'm like immersed in this group of amazing coworkers, and it's like I find myself again. And so it's really interesting how when I was in school, I was so much on this sort of classical music train that I kind of forgot who I was. And then when I was in Starbucks with everyone else who looked like me, I was able to really relax in a way that I hadn't before. So, and I wasn't really answering your question, but it just is something that I remember from that time is, you know, it was, I felt very welcomed there that I never really felt in school, by
Yeah.
the way. So we are like gathered together, sort of doing our job, having to wake up at like 4 in the morning, taking the subway to the fancy neighborhoods and serving coffee to people who, who couldn't be bothered with us. We were just workers, we were just service people to them.
Yeah.
And, I mean, a lot of people were rude to us. Like a lot of people were rude to all of us. And so it's hard to not develop a hard edge because of it. And yes, it was particularly disturbing to see people that I knew who they were be rude, Of course,
Yeah.
them not knowing, I'm just like some, some punk kid, whatever, in their eyes. I'm just some punk kid. But I knew who they were. And it just was really, yeah, I'll never forget that experience.
Sure.
And, it just kind of goes to show is like, sometimes people's true colors really come out when you don't think anyone's watching,
Yeah.
and just sort of being kind in all situations. Like you never know who's giving you your coffee at Starbucks. You never know like what they've been going through.
Yeah.
They could have had like a really hard day, and and because they're not quite as fast making your latte, it doesn't deserve to be, chided at. It's just, you know, anyway, it's just,
Yeah.
I recommend having this kind of job for a lot of people, for everyone, just to kind of get a
Yes.
sense of, just humanity, just to
Yeah.
get a survey of how
I've
people
worked in restaurants and in service before, and
Mhm.
yeah, it's you do see people's true colors,
Amazing.
and it is amazing, and it can be disheartening, and you realize the importance of kindness to everyone, and it makes you be more appreciative of everybody, and know that yes, everyone's going through something, and you don't know what other people are doing in their lives, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I wanted to switch gears a little bit to college and university jobs, and talk about you kind of scoring your first job at UNLV. And what was that process like, kind of getting your materials together, going for that first big, huge teaching job? And were you shocked that you got it? Were you going in there confident, like you had got it 100%, you knew it was yours?
Yeah, the answer is no. Yeah, so I can't remember the exact year, but so I graduated Yale, worked at Starbucks. So this is while I'm working at Starbucks. I start playing and I start doing some gigs in town while working, and then I got a small teaching job. It's not a small teaching job, but an adjunct job in Pennsylvania. So I was commuting to Pennsylvania once a week, kind of getting my chops, like sort of like just honing my teaching chops. So I was teaching college students. They weren't performance majors, but they were some really amazing students that I worked with, and so I kind of got a lot of experience teaching college age students and teaching some advanced repertoire. And for the first few years I was in New York, I, was very happy and content with what I was doing, just, bouncing back and forth between lots of different things. But then, I decided to try to get, that steady paycheck and try to get that salary job. And so the year that the UNLV job was open, there was actually a slew of openings that year. It was actually a pretty interesting year, which not many years has been where there's been a lot of tenure track job openings, but I think there
No.
was like 4 or 5 good positions open all in the same year. And so, I just applied at all of them just to see. And so, I got sort of the call back for the phone interview. So we had a phone interview for UNLV. And at that point, I had already done a couple of phone interviews. And so I had sort of gotten experience at that. But with every sort of stage of the application, I sort of looked to my friends who had gotten tenure track jobs at other places for guidance. So I know for each round I talked to friends who were flutists, but I also talked to other musicians too who had tenure track jobs. I had mock phone interviews with people, and I had people look over my cover letters for the first round of the process. But So, you know, when I went into the actual interview, the on-campus interview, the only time I was actually, right at that time, I was touring with my quintet, and I literally had like 2 days available, and they're like, okay, we could do it on those 2 days. And so the way it worked, I played a concert. I remember this. Played a concert in New York at like 4 p.m. And then I took an 8 o'clock flight from New York to Las Vegas. I arrived at Vegas at 1 a.m. and then got picked up at 7 a.m. for my interview the next day. And I had the interview, which includes, you know, you have to play a recital, give a master class,
Yeah.
meet with the chair, all this. So that whole process happened that day. And then that night I had to take a red-eye flight back to, I think, Pennsylvania, because I had a concert that next day. And so it was like sandwiched in this impossible like trip of concerts. So in a way, I was very relaxed because I was so tired. Like I was just trying to stay awake. And
Yeah.
so in a way, I think that was in my favor, because I really wasn't as nervous as I probably would have been if it was like I was looking forward to this for like weeks and I had everything, my whole
The
brain was
anticipation
just
build up. Yeah.
geared toward this. I was just like, just on fumes, just
Yeah.
trying to like, you know, get everything going. And so I think it made me more relaxed. And so I think not that I suggest
I was going to say results may
applying for
vary
jobs.
for other people. Yeah.
No, I like,
Not
but the
true.
idea,
Yeah.
right, the idea that it wasn't, that I was like, that I was more relaxed because, you know, I had other things going on.
Yeah.
It helped me. And so, you know, for people who are applying for jobs, you know, like this is just one little moment in your life. And, you know, if you, the more you can kind of just take stock of, this is just one little thing. And there's all these other things. Like if you put all of your energy into it, sometimes it can, you know, be a little bit stressful. And
Yeah.
so for me, it worked in my favor to just be more relaxed. So
And it went well for you while you were there in 2017. They honored you with Teacher of the Year award, which must have been a very special moment for you. Um, and I guess I'm kind of wondering. I mean, that's a big accolade, but what drives teachers is usually just the everyday success of their students, the small wins and the big wins too. So, what does that mean for you in teaching? When do you feel like you've really sent someone on a good path, whether it be in music or not?
yeah, it's every student is different and every situation is different. And, you know, it's not necessarily that you have a student win a job
Right.
or a student get into like the best music school, like that is success. You know, what student success is, you know, sort of making a difference in any way. And it can be through music, but it also can be through other things too. It can be through other professions. And so kind of the idea of a student, especially at the undergraduate level, you know, you're not necessarily training them to become a flutist. You're kind of training them to sort of think critically. You're training them to, you know, develop discipline, to, you know, sort of kind of carve their own path, come up with their own ideas, you know, come up with their own interpretations, their own ideas, having them learn how to become teachers on their own. So I think all of those things, you know, sort of signify success, you know, not just, you know, did I land a job or like, did someone win a competition or anything like that. I don't think that's necessarily for what student success is.
Sure. And you landed the University of Miami gig too, and you had some big shoes to fill there. What was it like
Mm-hmm.
coming to Miami and kind of molding that studio into your vision?
Yeah. I
Starting,
mean, I haven't been here very long, and
yeah,
like over half the time I've been in this job, we've been in a pandemic. So so I started the job in the fall of 2019. So I got less than a year into the job before everything kind of shut down. So um, you know, I'm sort of dealing with it like I think like everyone's dealing with, you know, trying to do a job during a pandemic. And
yeah,
No, but the school is amazing, you know, and yes, the teacher before Trudy Kane is, you know, amazing, amazing, legendary figure. And I remember I took a lesson with her. I was preparing for the Met audition, like
Oh,
second
fun.
or something like a million years ago. And so I remember going to her Manhattan apartment for a lesson a long time ago. And, you know, you know, and then when she first started at this job, one of my students, one of my master's students, ended up studying with her for the DMA, and so I had sent her students before. So, you know, it was definitely a huge figure to look up to, and huge shoes to fill. You know, but I think, you know, as with all of these kinds of jobs, you know, I mean, I can't fill anybody's shoes. I can
Right.
just have my own shoes, and my own shoes are pretty different. You know, it's like I don't have it. I never worked at the Met, so you know, my shoes are very different, more of a chamber music focus, and so in a lot of contemporary music and Baroque music, and so I've been doing a lot of that here, and it's just something different for the students, and it's different for, you know, it's different for the community here, and so I'm finding, you know, ways to kind of, you know, insert little things that I do, and it's working out pretty well. Um, Hopefully, when the world opens up again, I can continue to do more of those projects.
Yeah. Well, do you get to work with Valerie Coleman very much there? She's also in charge of chamber music, and you were just talking about, your involvement in that. So what is that relationship like?
Yeah, so Valerie Coleman, she is the head of chamber music and entrepreneurship at the Frost School. And so she organizes all of the chamber ensembles. And so all of my students who play in chamber groups, she organizes all of them into ensembles of their own. And she coaches like most of the groups, I think she coaches them. And she participates in our weekly, we have woodwind forum classes, and she comes to our woodwind forum. In fact, we're having one later
Oh,
today.
oh,
And yeah, and so we definitely are doing lots of collaborating with the chamber music aspect. And you know, she's actually really created this whole program. I think it hadn't really had a lot of structure to it before she got here, and now it's like, you know, we're exploding with chamber music, which is fantastic because it's what I love to do.
yeah. Are you still performing with your chamber group from New York City?
Well, okay, no, but I mean, normally, yes. Not right now.
Right.
So, we do have a concert in May, fingers crossed. So we do have a concert in May. So hopefully we'll go back on tour in May. But yes, we're still playing with the group,
Yeah.
Zephyros Winds, and you know, it's a group that I've been, you know, I joined the group right when I moved to New York. I've been in the group over 20 years. It's an established group. I had to audition for the group when I was living in New York, and now I'm actually the longest serving member of the group. So I've been in the group the longest now. But I had to audition. I had 2 rounds of auditions to get
Wow.
into that group. It was pretty grueling at the time. And but yeah, it's a group that's evolved. I mean, it's not a group that's a full-time group at all. And, you know, each member has very unique sort of positions in their communities. We're not all living in New York. We used to all live in New York, and then, you know, we all kind of started, you know, splintering off into different places. But what brings us back together is that the 5 of us just work really well together. And like the music making is at its best when like you have people who, you know, who motivate you, who challenge you, who push you, who inspire you. And like when you find that group, like you don't want to let it go no
Yeah.
matter what. So when I was living in Las Vegas, like I wanted this group to happen, and I would take red eye flights back to New York just to rehearse with these people because it meant so much for me and my creativity. So yeah, we're keeping going, you know, and hopefully we'll resume as things continue. Fingers crossed that, you
Yeah.
know, things will start opening up soon.
Yeah. And what was it like when you did audition and you got that spot, joining a group that was already established and kind of, trying to fit in like a puzzle piece?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was, you know, it was a group. We had a manager, and we had, I don't know, I can't remember, like between 20 and 30 concerts a year. And, you know, so it was pretty busy for a woodwind quintet at the time. And, you know, basically we had, I think it was a long time ago now, so I can't remember, but I remember they gave me a list of repertoire I had to learn. And then I came, and then they asked me back for a second round, and then I think we played. I remember playing Barbara's Summer Music for the first round, Iber maybe, Hindemith. And then I remember for the second round we played Nielsen, and then we sight read music, and I did not know about the sight reading, and that was like freaked me out. So I'm not
Yeah.
a great sight reader, and so I was like very nervous. I thought it would be over, but but it ended up they accepted me, and so yeah, it was that group was very when I started the group, it was very intimidating. Everyone there I think went to Curtis, and then there's like little old me, and so I was like very intimidated. And over time, I was able to kind of assert myself, but I was just so inspired to be with these people and to like learn from them and offer my unique perspective, I suppose, as well. But for me, it was like really a learning experience. And then that definitely has evolved. And, once you become more comfortable, you're able to like, give more of yourself. And it took a while for me, but eventually it happened.
And I mean, I hope you guys get to play again very soon after the pandemic, whenever that may be, the light at the end of the tunnel. More performances will be happening. Do you think there's any lessons that musicians, programmers can learn from this last year, how to move things forward for live music?
It's I think it'll be interesting to see how things develop. I wonder, I think the online presence, the on like how things have started really exploding online. Like first, it seemed like it was like out of desperation, and now it's like people. That's how people are really getting their content. I think that will always be a part of the future, and so that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. I don't really want to make any predictions, but I feel like online online activities will still be around, and be very formidable in the future. I also feel that you know touring ensembles may be more difficult for touring ensembles, and focusing on establishing either organizations or groups where you're located, might be a really interesting thing that I don't know that might happen. I'm sort of sensing that that might happen, like more local concerts versus touring groups coming in.
Yeah,
So, especially overseas right now, because people are still worried about travel. I mean, I think it may be a while for people to feel comfortable flying,
of course.
internationally too. So I'm very hopeful because we've had so long without live music that I'm very hopeful that things will open up soon and that things will go back to the way they were. But I really would like for them um, to to. I just don't know if we're going to come back to the way it was. But in terms of programming, sort of in addition to the pandemic, but I think sort of what I think is really significant for the arts is, the reactions to the social unrest of last year and how that's starting to affect programming.
Mhm.
And I think that definitely has gotten more legs this year than at any other point in time. Like I mentioned earlier, I've been talking about, programming diverse music and performing composers of color. I've been doing that for several years, sort of prominently and sort of trying to advocate for that. But only this year, people seem to be, thinking about it more intently.
Yeah.
So I am very hopeful that that will be a continuing process and that people will be more open to, hiring more people and also just doing more research to find out more people,
Yeah.
find more people. There's, as I said earlier, there's amazing flutists everywhere, like it doesn't have to be like the flute community doesn't have to be this isolated elitist group of people. There's a lot of strong, really incredible musicians everywhere. They may not all have gotten the same amount of attention as some of the sort of, people in that elite circle. And so we got to just bust that elite circle open. And I think the more that we do that, and, but we have to do the research. We can't just like, just we also just can't hire the same two or three people either. We have to find, we have to find the people. We have to find people to play. And, I did a little bit of that with the NFA summer series of, trying to, not have the same faces. The same faces are wonderful. The same faces are great, but it's also good to bring in new people into the community. And so I'm hoping that more people do that. And it looks like people are doing that. So I appreciate
How
that.
is the NFA planning coming is it for this year? How are things going?
It's coming.
Yeah.
I probably have many emails in my inbox right now, and it's coming. You know, um, so I was the convention program chair for Dallas in 2020, and then we postponed to 2021 thinking, oh, we'll be well behind us by now and we'll have a live convention in 2021, and sadly that's still not the case. And so we are virtual convention for this August. The convention will be a 4-day event during August 12th to 15, and so my programming is essentially the same, but with some modifications. So I'm still working out some of those details, and of course the larger detail of the online platform and all of
Yeah.
those things are being worked out. But
Well, I hope to your point about, including more people, that, I mean, maybe the perk of it being virtual is that we can have more people from farther distances that might not have come to perform at NFA in the past.
exactly. And so those things are definitely happening and possible. And so we'll, like, once everything gets announced, yeah, I'm hoping that we'll have a further reach
Yeah.
that normally we wouldn't be able to have. So,
Well, looking forward to it.
yeah.
Thank you so much for being here today and chatting with me. It was really fantastic.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me. This has been a really fun conversation. And thank you to the Flute Center of New York.
You're very welcome. All right. Bye, Jennifer.
Thanks. Bye.